Now, we are joined today with a really unique guest that and that's saying something, with Bill Romanowski as the host, who's always come with his pockets full of amazing and interesting guests. We've got probably the most unique guests that we've had so far on the Health and Wellness Club. And I'm joined by full-time firefighter and EMT Daniel Sundahl. Daniel, welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, Dan takes photos. In our ongoing series these next 3 weeks, we're talking to folks who are involved as first responders, as psychologists, as people who are really find themselves in the heart of stress-filled situations. And Dan is no different. In fact, Dan not only is an EMT and a full-time firefighter, he actually takes photographs of many of the situations that he's in and creates artwork from them. And if you've seen them, and you can see them at dansunphotos.com, you'll see that they are so lifelike and real that they could have only come from actual experience. Dan, you're a full-time firefighter and EMT. You'd think that the world in which you live was stressful enough without you having to relive all of these traumatic events through your photographs and your painting. How do you separate yourself from all the angst, et cetera, that these photos depict?
Well, it's funny, and people have asked me that before, but the images are actually very therapeutic for me, and it's actually my therapy for my better mental health. And I know that sounds really odd to relive the situation, but it is very healing for me. So the material for my artwork is inspired from calls I've actually done as a firefighter and a paramedic. And I get the material from the calls that kind of invade my brain. I remember a lot of the calls that I do, but these are the calls that come into my mind uninvited, and that's how I know which images to process. And when I think of these calls are calls, some of them I've done 15 years ago. I remember every single detail of them, and the week or 2 weeks it takes to produce the artwork, I'm thinking about the call, I'm processing the call, and when I'm done, it's changed. It's turned from this organic force in my brain that invades my mind into this one-dimensional art piece. And then when I look at that image, that's how I remember that image now, versus this organic entity that enters my brain uninvited. So it's very therapeutic for me, which seems really odd to think of that way because I am reliving a stressful situation, but it's like purging that call from my mind onto my computer screen, and it's very therapeutic and cathartic for me to do that.
Now, you mentioned something that's interesting, and that is that you have taken something that's a real sort of organic feeling and an organic picture in your mind, very vivid, multi-dimensional, really, because you've experienced it. You smelt it, you saw it, you heard it, you felt it. The words you used struck with me. You've turned them from something that's an organic, visceral, multi-sensory experience into something that is one-dimensional on your screen. And in that way, you've been able to compartmentalize it to say, okay, this is how now so now you can't smell it, you can't see it in your mind's eye because you can see it on a one dimension on your screen. You don't touch it and you can't feel it the way you used to. Is that a fair, accurate description?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's my therapy. That's how I process these calls, and I'm lucky that I have that outlet to do that.
You're absolutely right. So let's go back to how this started. How did you? I mean, the message is brilliant, and that is, take this terrible traumatic. I mean, the one with the suicide and the shotgun is probably one of the more graphic ones that you've done, and it's one dimensional, and it's stuck with me. I'll tell you that. How did you get into realizing that this is how you could cope?
Well, first, I want to mention that a lot of people make comments on my artwork as being graphic, and some people have said it's been gratuitous, but it's not. I don't add, like that one with the shotgun is quite graphic, but it's not as graphic as the actual scene, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
But I never add anything extra. I never dramatize anything. That's, so people think that that's really graphic. Well, imagine seeing that in real life, right? It's really, I don't really add anything. Sorry, Drew, what was I got off track. What was the question?
No. Yeah. Well, how did you realize that you had this really cathartic ability to take something that is just sort of overwhelming and flatten it down and put it on a little 15-inch or 22-inch or 26-inch screen, and that would make it manageable for you? How did you discover this?
Well, I was doing, it's all photo-based, and before I started including my career and my experiences in my photography, I was taking pictures of landscapes and my dogs and that type of stuff. So it was already a hobby of mine. And I decided to, I was suffering from an occupational stress injury from the calls that I've done. And these calls just kept invading my mind. So I decided, I'm going to recreate this call through my photography. And the first one that I did, I really was surprised, the emotions I went through while I was creating the artwork. And I think the emotions really came out in the image. And when I was done, it felt very good. It was very therapeutic. And even now my artwork is very therapeutic for myself. I don't do it for anybody else. It's my own thing. And when I was done, I was terrified. I didn't share my first images for months because I was really scared what the first responder community would think, showing a picture of a paramedic and a firefighter that is under emotional stress in a stressful environment, because we're supposed to be these infallible heroes that, can go into any situation and perform. Mm-hmm. And I was showing that, that isn't necessarily the case. Mm-hmm. So I was really terrified to show it to anybody, and it was never my intention to show it to anybody at the start, and I never did. It was my own way to process. It was my own therapy, and it still is. But then I decided, I am going to show it, mostly because it was just visually, I thought it was a nice looking image. It was very, the contrast in the colors.
Oh, yeah.
And so I shared it on my social media page. At the time, I had maybe 20 friends, and I thought, if they don't like it, whatever. But once I shared it on my social media pages, not thinking, actually expecting really to be attacked really from the community, that's when it really went viral. And what I really didn't expect would happen was so many other first responders would attach their own experiences or connect my artwork with their own experiences and really relate to it. And that's when things really went viral and everyone started connecting and attaching their experiences to the artwork. And I never anticipated that to happen. And it's wonderful. So that's kind of how it all started, was a way to process my own feelings and kind of get over the stress that I was feeling. And once I decided to share it, apparently it's doing the same for many others.
Well, absolutely. And on your website, dansunphotos.com, there's all kinds of feedback from first responders really across North America in the world about how they see themselves in these images that you've painted and taken photographs of. Now, in many of your images, in many of your pieces of art, you include things that aren't typically, or that we don't see, that you didn't necessarily see, or maybe you have seen those. You have these sort of apparitions, these spirits, as you call them, you add them in some of your pieces, and those spirits can range from the actual deceased, spirit of the deceased, to family members, to even, I think you've got one in which someone who manages the box, right, the 911 call center. Standing over her is the apparition of another firefighter, another EMT. Tell us about how did those, you're taking a camera to tragic events, accidents and such, and you're photographing what's visible to everyone there. You've after the fact, you add these sort of spirits. Tell us a little bit about how that manifests itself. How does it, what role do these spirits play in your art?
Sure. Well, first, I don't take my cameras to the scene, so all my images are staged. I never take a picture while I'm working. I don't have my camera with me in the ambulance. It's that would be very unethical to do that. They're all, when I think of the image or the next image I'm going to do, I stage the image with my coworkers or friends to recreate that scene. So all the images they're not real. They're all staged images.
Okay, very interesting.
So yeah, it'd be very unethical for me to stop and take a picture of, someone in a situation like that. Yeah, I don't do that. So yeah, I just wanted to make that clear. But yeah, as far as the spirits go, again, it's how I process the call. So I'm not just recreating the scene. I'm really recreating my feelings at the time. One of the very first images that I did was a paramedic in the back. He's doing CPR. It's kind of the two images, and the second image is him. He's sitting there. He's got his gloved hands on his head, which is a big no-no. But he's so distressed, and the spirit of the patient is sitting in the airway seat, staring at him. And my thoughts during that call, it was a call of I call him a boy, but he was a man. He was 21 years old. He was killed on his motorbike by a drunk driver. And as we were trying to stabilize him in the back of our ambulance, he was in fact dying. He was calling for his mother. But instead of saying mom, 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 he was saying mommy, mommy, mommy. He regressed back to a little boy. That's why I envisioned him as this little boy. But when I added the spirit in the back of the ambulance with him staring at the paramedic, which is representing me, my initial intention was that he's very mad and upset, telling the paramedic or feeling, why didn't you save me? And my feeling for that call, I didn't feel like I failed my patient. I feel like I failed his mother. So and that was my feeling of that call. It wasn't so much the patient, because we have lots of people die in the back of our ambulances. But this particular case, what affected me is that he was calling for his mommy, which really kind of affected me. So when I did the image and had the spirit there, that's kind of how I portrayed me failing his mother, not so much the patient. So a lot of my other images, when I include the spirits, they're there to portray how I was feeling about that particular call. Another image that's very popular is a firefighter paramedic sitting in the back of a fire truck, and on the bumper, and on the other side of the bumper is this little girl, Angel, and the firefighter's holding a teddy bear with blood on it, and then the little girl is a spirit with angel wings, and she has the teddy bear. And that image was based on a call I did. We went to a motor vehicle collision where a family was killed. We didn't have to try any resuscitation. It was obvious death. But I saw this little teddy bear with blood on it. And that call just kept invading my brain, and it was the things that I would remember as I would see this little girl in this car. And it was, the vision of that was very disturbing for me. But when I created that artwork and then made the little girl an angel with holding her teddy bear, that's how I now remember her. I don't remember her as this mangled little body in a car. I now remember her as this little angel who still has her teddy bear with her. So it really converted how I felt about that call. So often I use these spirits to portray how I was feeling during that call.
Yeah, and it sounds like the and that's really the key thing. And we're going to be talking to Dr. Lisa Berry here in a second. But painting your feelings is really kind of what this is about, right? It's not. You're not painting, disparate first responders and their charges, the victims of accidents, etc. You're really what you're getting out, and I think that we're going to talk to Dr. Berry about this. But it's not so much you're depicting the scenes that you saw. It's you're depicting what you felt, and that's the cathartic part of it. Is that what you believe?
Yeah, that's 100% true, and it's really scary. I'm really exposing myself mentally through my artwork, and it is very, very personal to me, and I'm just encouraged to continue because so many other paramedics and EMTs and firefighters and police officers can relate to them through their own experiences. And I'll always continue to do this as my therapy. Now, it's not, it doesn't make everybody happy. I get a lot of emails and messages from people who don't think what I'm doing is fantastic, but it is very, I'm sharing my feelings, and I'm really exposing my mind to the whole community, which at times can be quite scary.
Yeah. But is there a situation you can tell us about that where someone had a real issue with what you're doing?
Yeah, I think this job doesn't affect everyone the same way. I'm not implying that, everybody is affected, has occupational stress injuries or PTSD, because it certainly doesn't happen to everybody. And I'm not implying it happens to everybody. Like I said, this is very personal to me, and this is my therapy. But some of the people that aren't affected that way, they do think that I'm portraying the industry in a negative way and showing, a fallible side of our profession, maybe because it doesn't affect them. So I do get a lot of messages that way. But what often happens, and I'm encouraged, or I feel like I want to respond, but what happens is the community will respond for me. Mm. So when I post a new image, most of the comments are very positive, and that's very therapeutic for me as well, and other people that are reading it, because they're realizing that, the situation I was in really isn't unique. It's very common, and I can realize other people can relate to it, which is very therapeutic for me and others. But somebody will make a negative comment saying, I don't know, you knew what you were getting yourself into, why are you complaining? What did you expect was going to happen when you got in this field? Man up, get back to work and just stop complaining, that kind of thing. And I want to answer those people, but I don't have to, because I know the community will answer for me. Wow. And it's great to watch that, because, they'll answer, and then I'll watch the communication between those two people, and most of the time they'll talk back and forth and get to a common ground of understanding, which is fantastic. So it's gone from a very negative comment to, realizing, well, yeah, maybe I don't feel that way, but some people certainly do. As the suicide rates certainly prove that it does affect many of us that way. So it's nice to read those comments where people come to a common ground of understanding. May not affect everybody the same way. And the truth is, if you don't like my artwork or doesn't make you feel good, then just don't follow my page or don't look at it. Really, I'm not forcing anybody.
Right. So what outside of the artwork that you produce, is there a piece of advice that somebody throughout your EMT career gave you, possibly at the very beginning, for how to handle the absolutely mind-blowing things you were going to experience as a technician and a firefighter?
Unfortunately not. When I started a long time ago, we didn't really talk about it, and it really wasn't brought up even in my schooling of how to handle these things. But what I would say now, as an experienced firefighter and paramedic, for people getting into it, I would say that, if you do get affected from the things that you see, just know that you're not alone in the way that you feel, and the way that you're feeling isn't unique. And in fact, it's a normal response to abnormal situations that you're seeing. So it's quite, it's a normal thing. The big thing about people who have occupational stress injuries is that they're embarrassed, or they think they're sick, or they think they're they're damaged for the way that they're feeling. But that's just not the case. It's a normal response, and it's quite common. And they're not alone in the way that they're feeling. So if they do start feeling those things, then it's best to talk to somebody or get help, or talk to someone that's specializes in occupational stress injury and PTSD for first responders.
Right, and I think you raise a great point, and a good starting point is community, and you've created a community with your artwork. As you said, it went viral, and you're you've got a place. Your website, dansunphotos.com, is a place where first responders, EMT, policemen, etc., can go and maybe work through some of their issues. Obviously, not in lieu of a professional, but certainly just to know you've got a community. And as you said, you're not feeling this for the first time. You're not alone. Millions of people have been through this, and lean on them for their experiences, etc. I think is a great piece of advice. Now, before I let you go, at the risk of sort of seemingly to ask you which of your kids you prefer, is there a piece that really resonates with you more than perhaps others, whether it's because of the circumstances or the people involved, etc.?
It's usually the last image that I've done is my favorite. As an artist, I feel my work is evolving as my feelings change. But I think the last image is usually always my favorite one. Probably right now, my current favorite one is an image of a paramedic and angel, and it's a side view, and they're touching foreheads. And what a lot of people don't see in that image is that in the top right-hand corner, there's the devil, and he's screaming. When people first see the image, they think it's a sad image because the paramedic looks sad and down, and he's being comforted by this angel. But the truth is, and what my feeling was, is that he's getting the help that he needs, and the devil is screaming because he no longer has his grips on the paramedic. And a lot of people don't see that devil in the top right-hand corner because he's very faded away. I get invited to conferences to display my artwork, and I'm a speaker, and I speak about occupational stress injury, my own experiences. And I bring up that image, and when first people see it, they think it's a sad image, and I ask them. And then when I point out that the devil in the top right-hand corner, it totally changes the feel of the image, because now it's a very healing image. So I think right now that is probably my favorite image.
Interesting. The devil really is in the details.
Yeah, that's right.
So we've been visiting with Daniel Sundahl, EMT and full-time firefighter out of Alberta, Canada. He's got some amazing artwork at dansunphotos.com. Daniel, thanks so much for being our guest this week.
It's great. Thanks, Drew.